we are looking at redistricting that's coming up in 2021 or 2022. It's coming up pretty quickly. And what we want to do is build fair districts with a fair process. Redistricting is the activity that goes on every 10 years after the census data is released. So census is usually done in like 2020. The data isn't released until 2021. So the process happens usually in that following year, 2021 or 2022. The data that it provides allows the states to determine their congressional seats. There are 6 in Kentucky, our 38 Kentucky Senate seats, and our 100 Kentucky House seats. And it also provides the data for many city, county, and school board races. So this is really important information. Redistricting can make it either easier or harder for voters to learn about the candidates, for citizens to communicate with their representatives, although these days with social media and email, it's easier than it used to be to connect with them. It also can make it easier or harder for parties to compete against one another, and that's where gerrymandering comes in. It can also make it easier or harder for members of racial minorities to select candidates that they want to have represent them. And it also allows for either easier or harder access or representation of regions within a state to get their distinctive interests considered. So we've got rural, we've got urban, we've got suburban, we've got areas that are growing economically, areas that are impoverished. And so those areas need to be well represented in Frankfort. To gerrymander means to divide a unit into districts that give one political party a majority in a larger number of districts, while concentrating the strength of a few opposition party members in smaller districts. And so that's called cracking and packing. If you want to put a lot of people of one party into one district so that you've got maybe a Democratic district, put lots of people in that district, but then spread out the districting so that those around it have fewer Democrats and more Republicans or vice versa. So the basic idea is it gives an advantage to political units, and that's not quite fair. Here's a very egregious example. This is Pennsylvania's 7th senatorial district. It was, and we call it Goofy Kicking Donald Duck. But this is all one district. They have to be contiguous, so they have to connect, but you can see these connections are pretty skinny. And obviously there was some picking and choosing here of neighborhoods for this district. Now, here's an important question, and that is, why does the league care about this? Well, 3 big reasons. One, we think voters should be electing their representatives in Frankfort rather than our representatives choosing us. And it's very obvious that representatives, when they have the power to draw these lines, choose their voters. Second reason is, when you have really safe districts, elected officials don't have to compromise. If you know you're in a district and all the people in your district are pretty solid in your party, you don't have to worry about what the other party is talking about. You don't have to represent those people. You can represent just those folks in your party. And this last thing, and then that leads to polarization and gridlock, which we're seeing in abundance these days in Kentucky as well as across the state. And then the other thing is, poorly drawn districts can lead to costly lawsuits. And that happened in Kentucky in 2012. The lines were drawn poorly, there were lawsuits brought, and the final redistricting did not happen until 2013. And so there was an extra period of time when folks were not well represented in Kentucky. So we'd like to avoid that. Now, the required rules for redistricting are basically these three. The first is one person, one vote. And that is, districts must be as close to equal in population as possible. In congressional districts, they have to be nearly perfectly equal. There's not much fudge room. But in the House and Senate seats for Kentucky, they must be within 5% of equal population. So there's some flexibility there. And that is helpful when you start to look at the 120 counties that we have. Second thing is there must be an opportunity for minority representation. So there must be districts of opportunity where minority voters have a chance to select their representatives, people who can represent them in Frankfort. And then there's another rule in Kentucky, this is Kentucky specific, where the House and Senate districts must not divide counties except only when absolutely needed. The problem with that is that once a county is divided, it gets divided multiple times. And you'll see examples of that as I show you, in particular Fayette County and some other districts. So those are the mandated rules. Now, the federal courts have tackled redistricting issues or been asked to tackle redistricting issues. But in their latest ruling a year ago, June, they determined that they were going to leave this up to the states. They were not going to intervene. And so what happened in Pennsylvania is that a rule or a lawsuit was brought. And you think about the 7th district and how crazy that looked. And the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. And so what happened is Pennsylvania had some redistricting to a much simpler map. Now here's District 7 down here. You see how much different that is. And you know, these lines look like they make some sense. And here's the difference between the 7th Senate district before and the 7th Senate district after. So you can tell that there was obvious gerrymandering going on here. Now let's look at the Kentucky maps. Any questions about any of that before we go to the Kentucky maps? Okay. Okay, so here are our 6 congressional districts. Now there's no Goofy in this map, but there is, I think this looks a little like a turtle without a head, with its head tucked in and its little legs sticking out. So the 2nd district is kind of strange. The 1st district is the really most bizarre. There was a determination that Owensboro and Warren County would be in the same district. Those are very populous counties. And Warren, which is up here, is also a very populous district. And so that got smaller, but in order to accommodate Western Kentucky, we ended up with this semicircle here, which is a little strange. I'll show you in just a minute where the congressmen live. The 3rd district is Jefferson County. Now, a little bit of the 3rd of the Jefferson had to go into the 4th district, but that makes some sense. The 4th district makes a little sense because it kind of goes along the Ohio River. 6th district, pretty reasonable. And the 5th district, Eastern Kentucky, is pretty reasonable. Now, the thing that I think is interesting about this map is our congressman. In the 1st district, Congressman Jamie Comer lives down here in Monroe County. In the 2nd district, Brett Guthrie lives here in Warren County. And in the 5th district, Congressman Hal Rogers lives in Pulaski County. So right in this little area, we've got 3 congressmen of our 6. And you know, they're rural. Guthrie is here in Warren. But Susan, my friend Susan, who drew the maps, some of which you'll see a little later, lives over here in Boyle County, right here. And in order to visit, and she's made a few trips to visit her congressman, she's got to go all the way down here. And if somebody wanted to visit Senator or Congressman Comer, they'd have a pretty long trip across the state. Then in the 6th district, of course, our Congressman Andy Barr lives right here in the central Kentucky in Fayette. That makes sense. And then the 3rd, Congressman Yarmouth is in Jefferson. That makes sense. In the 4th district, Congressman Massey lives way out here in Lewis County. And as we've talked to people in these populous areas of Boone, Campbell, and Kenton, they've said they'd kind of like to have somebody from their area represent them. So, you know, that's just the way it is. Now, people have asked whether we might lose a congressional seat. And we've asked that a couple of times, and I've only heard one person say he's heard that we might. But when we met, Pregliasco and I went to a national conference of state legislators a year ago and asked that question, and they were pretty confident that we would not lose a seat. So that's important. So that's the congressional districts. Now, the problem with counties is, again, they can't be divided unless it's absolutely necessary to meet the population requirements. In the House, 20 counties were so big that they needed to be divided up. And in the Senate, there were 3 counties that were big enough to be targeted for division. And if we look at the current Senate districts, see a couple of weird things. In particular, if you notice, District 14 right here starts in southeastern Jefferson County and goes all the way down to Casey. It's pretty hard for that representative to travel that area and feel like he represents his folks because it's so stretched out. We also, if you'll notice, and I'll show you a close-up of Fayette in just a few minutes, but Fayette, no, that's the house. That's the house. Scott County goes from here all the way up to Kenton. And the interesting thing about Scott County is I spoke to somebody a couple of years ago when I said we were embarking on this project. And he said, oh, well, I can tell you about my county. I live in Scott County. And in Georgetown, you can stand in the middle of Main Street and be represented by one representative. You can walk across the street, be represented by another, and walk 3 blocks north and be represented by another. So now that's not Senate, that's House, but I'll show you that in a little bit. But that district runs up and down I-75, which makes some sense. And then we have these, what we call beads on a string. I'm not sure exactly why all that happened, but they're pretty common. And it's pretty hard for somebody in Johnson or Bell to run for this district. That's a long way north. Floyd, Knox, and Letcher are similar. These areas, 31 is kind of strange. And then here are another set that are kind of beads on a string. Now, if we look at Fayette County, Fayette County is represented by 5 senators. Senator Kerr in 12, her district is fully within the county. And Senator Reggie Thomas, his district is fully within the county. But Senator Buford lives in Jessamine County, and his district goes all the way from Jessamine down here to Garrett and then over here to Washington. So you can bet he doesn't pay a lot of attention to Fayette County. Then in 34, Jared Carpenter represents that district, and it goes all the way down to Rockcastle County. And then 28, District 28 is Representative Alvarado, and that's a huge chunk of Fayette County. And if you look at that on this map, it goes all the way across through Clark and through into Montgomery County. And he lives in Clark County. So he has come up for events for us in the past because he's got such a huge chunk. But many times when we have a candidate forum and we invite folks from these counties that represent lots of other territory, they don't find it worth their while to participate. So that's one disadvantage in terms of the folks living in Fayette County represented by these senators don't have much of a chance to learn about their senators. If you look at the House seats, many more districts get broken up. And you'll see that in particular, here's Jefferson County, here's Fayette County, Boone, Campbell, and Kenton all got divided, but they're so big, their population is so big that they have to share with other counties. One of the strange ones here is 61, although maybe not so strange if you think about I-75, but 61 goes from Kenton all the way down into Scott. There's that one I was telling you about. If you look at Fayette County, Fayette County is a little better in terms of representation. Now 72 goes all the way out to, if that's Matthew Koch, he lives in Bourbon County, but that goes all the way out to Bath. It goes through Nicholas County, Bourbon, and Bath County. So he gets stretched way out there. 62 goes all the way up to Owen County. You can see that. So here's Fayette, and this district goes all the way up to Owen. And then 77, 75, 79, 45, 76, and 88, they all are within the county, which makes a lot of sense. 77 is Representative Brown. 75 is Representative Flood. Representative Westrom is in 79. And so these make a little more sense. Not quite sure what this little zigzag is in 72, but, and not quite sure why this, I need to look at a map more closely, but that's probably US 60 going over to Frankfurt, into Versailles and then up to Frankfurt. Now, one of the problems with gerrymandering is a disproportionate representation. Now, this is the first time I've used this slide, and once I've done this, I'd be delighted if you would give me suggestions for ways to make the point better. But after the 2010 census, the House was still in control by the Democrats. The Senate was controlled now for the first time by Republicans. And so in Fayette County, Republicans drew the lines for the Senate. And after that, 2013, when the court suit was finalized and they got the final lines drawn, 80% of the Senate members were Republicans, while 30% of the voters in Fayette County were registered as Republicans. You would expect with fair representation that this 36% and 80% would be a little closer. 20% of the Senate members were Democrats, while 54% of them were registered as Democrats. So there's disproportionate representation there. Now, let me tell you, this happened in the other side of the chamber, or the House also. That was the Senate. This is the House. And in Jefferson County, where the Democrats drew the lines, 83% of the state House members in Jefferson were Democrats, but only 59% were registered as Democrats. and 17% of the members were Republicans, while only 32% of voters were registered Republicans. You want to call Miriam back and tell her I'll catch her later. So this is part of the problem. This is where you end up with lines being drawn to protect an incumbent or to try to protect a seat for a particular party. And if that seat is a really, really safe seat for one party or the other, then the folks in that district kind of have a sense that their vote doesn't count, because it doesn't matter what they do, that district is going to go to whichever party drew the lines. Now, does that make sense? Sorry, I should have unplugged that phone. Okay, this is a really important map. This is the one that you also have a copy of. This compares the 2010 census data with the 2018 census data that comes from the American Community Survey estimates. So this is going to change when we get the 2020 data, but this gives you a sense of the movement in population in the state. The red counties are growing, and the deeper the color, the greater the growth. So you can see Northern Kentucky, a lot of growth up here. Central Kentucky over to Jefferson, a lot of growth here. And then Warren is also growing. This is the I-75 corridor, and this is the I-64 corridor. Then you look at the blue counties. Blue demonstrates loss of population, and the deeper the color, the greater the loss. So look at Eastern Kentucky. Huge changes there. Same with far Western Kentucky. Now, what that means when it comes to redistricting is these districts geographically are going to have to become larger in order to even out the population, the larger population here and the smaller population here. These districts are going to get smaller in geographic area, because they're going to have to accommodate those increased numbers of people. So I had one representative tell me, who will be working on drawing the lines, he's really worried about these areas because he's probably going to have to mess up some of his fellow legislators, women or men, and mess up their districts. The very first senator that we talked to, probably 3 years ago now, maybe more, when we had a conversation with him, his comment was, well, you know, the first thing we do is protect our members. So that's unfortunately how it happens. But anyway, there's going to be a lot of shifting because of this population. In the recent past, redistricting has been done behind closed doors. And I'll give you one example. We were told by a legislator who was invited into the room where the maps were laid out to point out in the area where her district was, which neighborhood she would prefer. And she chose them, and guess what? They ended up in her district. Nobody sees these maps, or has in the past, until it's done and over with and signed. And we'd like to see that changed. The other thing that has been true, at least in the last round, is there were no public hearings and there was no public input. They were done, the bills were written, the maps were drawn, but nobody saw them until it was all done and signed and over with. And we'd like to see that changed. And then the other thing that happened in 2012 was the lawsuit that took an extra year, lots of time and energy and money in order to get our districts finalized and drawn. So So that's one, those are some issues that we are concerned about. The Supreme Court rejected that 2012 legislation and redistricting because it violated our Constitution. It failed to achieve sufficient population equality, so they didn't get the numbers right. And it failed to preserve county integrity. They broke up more counties than the court thought was necessary. And the plaintiffs won, and so the lines were redrawn. Now, what makes district fair? Well, in addition to the mandated rules that I mentioned earlier about population, minority representation, and counties, the league is calling for districts that are compact and competitive. In other words, they're not all safe districts. There are opportunities for both parties to elect their chosen representatives, and that they're drawn without preference to parties or incumbent office holders. Now, that's something that will probably be very difficult to change, but we'd love to see that. The best approach to a fair process would be an independent commission. And those are commissions that are appointed in a variety of ways, but they have the ultimate authority when it comes to determining where the lines are. They're chosen in ways that they try to create them as non-partisan. So both parties get to appoint, and it's difficult to do that, but there are a wide range of ways in which counties or states are doing that. These are the states that currently have nonpartisan independent commissions. One of the ways that these states have come to that process is through referendum. States like Michigan and California both recently had referendum on their ballots and went to independent commissions. Kentucky can't do that. If we wanted to go to an independent commission, our legislature would have to give up the authority and give it to a commission, and they would have to do it with a constitutional amendment. Very difficult process, so we know that's not a possibility. What we tried in 2019 and 2020 was we had a bill filed, House Bill 326, that instead of being an independent commission, would have created an advisory commission. It would have been created by appointment from leaders of both parties in both chambers, and then some additional folks. It would have created public hearings across the state to get public input and let people see what was possible. And it would have given the legislature a recommendation. Legislature could have looked at it, decided, yes, that's what we want to do, or no, we don't like it. They would send it back. The commission would redo based on the comments from legislators. It would go back a second time to the legislature, and if they chose, they didn't like it, they could create basically their own maps. That did not go anywhere. We talked to legislators, we didn't get a hearing, but we did get it out there. And a bill similar has been pre-filed, bill request number 157. And we're working with a legislator now to see if we can't get that filed. Even though it doesn't have a fair shot, we like to get it out there. It's an it's very nicely written bill. It's very well thought out. And we just like to get that kind of thing out in the public arena. So we will be refiling that bill. Now, the other things that we think would be important in terms of getting a fairer process in Kentucky is that there would be citizen input through hearings and chances to comment, that there would be transparency. We'd like the public to see the maps before they vote. And it would be good to build broad support through input and transparency that might end up not resulting in a lawsuit. One of the things that we discovered when Dee and I went to the National Conference of State Legislators is every single software company that creates software to draw these maps has made available through their software ways where the maps can be put up online. The public can go look, they can hone in on their area, their community. They can make comments before the final decisions are made. Maptitude is the program that the Kentucky legislature will be using. And the league was able to purchase Maptitude, and that's what Susan Weston is using to draw some potential maps for us. We'd like to be able to show the public, if the legislature doesn't, and even if they do, what might be possible by using a fair process. So those are the things we're really going to be pushing hard for. There is one problem, and we're not quite sure how this will be resolved, although we've got a clue this week. Back in 2019, the legislature decided that they were going to change the filing deadline for candidates. So the filing deadline used to be the end of January of the year of the election. And they've moved it up to the first week in January. And the rationale for doing that made perfect sense. Legislators basically sat on their thumbs from the 1st of January to the end of January until the filing deadline. They didn't want to vote on anything until they knew if they had opposition in their races. And so that month was basically wasted. And so the legislature took that to heart and changed the law. Well, that's fine until you get to a year when you're redistricting, because you can't, if you don't have the districts drawn, you don't know what district you live in and where you can file. And so that information has to be out there well before the filing deadline. So that filing deadline either needs to be pushed back, the legislature needs to get the job done in 2021 instead of 2022. And that would probably require a special session of the legislature, which is costly. Now, what we've heard today is the administration is pushing very hard to get the census data out sooner than later. The original deadline before COVID was April 1. With the additional time that was given to the Census Bureau to collect data, it's been assumed that that April 1 deadline would get pushed back. But we've heard today actually from the National League, and also there was a presentation this morning in a state government committee. It looks like it's possible that that data may come out sooner, and they might actually be able to get the work done in 2021. That means that we have to really hop to it if we're going to have some influence in that process. So we're asking legislators a couple of things, and what we'd like you to do is be contacting legislators. We'll be sending action alerts out with more details. But if you run across your legislator or happen to call him or want to, him or her, or want to send an email, we're asking for public input. We're asking for transparency. Show us the maps before you vote. They're going to have to somehow deal with the 2020 candidate filing deadline issue. And then they have to create districts that are equal in population, designed for competitive or for effective representation of racial minorities. And those are things they have to do. But then we'd like them also to be competitive and compact and drawn without preference to parties or incumbents. We will be, as I said, sending action alerts out. As we talked to legislators last year, they said, well, nobody's talking to, you're the only people coming and talking to us about this, because people don't know about it. And so one of the things that we're gonna try to do is be sure that they understand there are people paying attention and watching. So I'm going to stop sharing unless anybody has a question about a particular map. Questions or comments? Oh, I see a couple of names, familiar names. Do you all know what district you're in and who your representatives are? Those of you who live in Kentucky? Yeah, Kay-Ann?
A good example of all this maneuvering around, when I lived in Shelby County, the Shelby County, the 6th district went all the way to Shelby County.
Right.
And now it has, since I moved to Lexington, Shelby County has been in the 2nd district, and it's now in the 4th. So they're a little dizzy, I think.
Right. Right. Shelby was one of the few that was divided up for the congressional seats, and it's probably get divided again. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that looks. But yeah, you begin to wonder who your representatives are if you get moved around a lot.
And because the 5th district used to be half of it, the 7th district, they've lost so much population.
Right.
It's a huge, huge, huge district.
It really is. Do you remember what year it was that we lost that 7th seat? I don't remember.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, it's been quite a long time ago.
It's been a while, yeah. It was after Carl Perkins died.
You know, the one thing that's going to be interesting is with the challenge of getting the census data, I'm wondering how those population changes will hold that we're predicting from the 2018 data. If there will be that same kind of growth, or if the collecting the data has been such a problem that we won't get very good numbers. I know they made a big push on trying to get people to participate.
So I just want to point out, I put it in the chat box, but you can go to govoteky.com and find out what your districts are. You do the 2nd tab, it says absentee ballot request and review your registration, and it will show you exactly what districts you are for congressional and then also for your House districts. I also noticed we have another question. Maybe this was from Stephanie Nelson. Is there any way districts can see where candidates live before elections? This could make a difference in the votes. In my county, Boone has not much in common with Ashland.
Yes, that can be done. If you go to, if you're talking about congressional races, if you just Google congressional seats Kentucky, the 6 representatives will come up with their current location, where their current residence. In terms of candidates, you would need to probably go to their political campaign websites and find out where they live. And when they register with the Secretary of State to actually file, they have to include that information. So it is possible to find that. You just have to know where to prowl around. Okay. Any other questions or comments about your district?
So Cindy, you mentioned that we would need to have people contacting legislators to let them know that people are interested in this. Like, how many people do you think would need to be contacting them for them to take this seriously?
Well, in the past, I've been told that if they get 10 comments about an issue, they start to pay attention. And so in this situation, you know, one of our challenges this year with the Republican control of the House and Senate is they have super majorities, and they're going to pretty much be able to do anything they want. But they do want to get reelected. The House members are elected every 2 years. So they pay a little more attention, I think, to constituent contacts. Senators are elected for 4 years. And so there's a wider span between their elections. But if we could get 10 or more contacts from constituents living in those areas, that would be terrific. Now that's pretty hard to do because we've got 100 counties, 100 legislators in the House and 38 in the Senate. But what we'll probably be doing as we send out action alerts is targeting members of leadership chairman of the committees that will be seeing these bills and working on them, and then members of the leadership in the House and Senate. Unfortunately, Lexington does not have anybody in leadership. I think that's right. They'll be re-electing and appointing leadership in the January session, the first week of the session. So we'll see what that looks like. And of course, most of us live in the Fayette County area. So if we talk to our legislators, many of them will be in favor, probably, because a lot of them are Democrats. And of course, the party out of power are the ones that want to change the process because they'd like to feel like it was a fairer process.
Cindy?
Uh-huh.
And for the last time you mentioned that there was a suit brought and that it was declared as unconstitutional. Who brought the suit against the legislature?
One of the plaintiffs was a representative from Northern Kentucky who felt like the counties in Northern Kentucky were divided up poorly. And I'm not sure if that was the same suit that brought the concern about population.
So is the possibility of having a suit brought against them a deterrent, much of a deterrent to the legislature, enough of a deterrent so they won't do anything terribly wonky? Or
well, as I've talked to some folks in Frankfurt, legislators, especially Republicans, they're saying we want a chance to do this ourselves this time. And we're hoping that they will, since they have the majority and we've really turned into a red state, we'd love for them to say, okay, our leadership, our strength is probably going to be protected. We could do some rational redistricting and use a fair process because it probably doesn't matter what they do. They'll still both be in Republican control. So they want a chance to do it themselves this time before they would turn it over to a commissioner or anybody else. They all are concerned about lawsuits. When we went to the conference in Columbus last year, the Conference of State Legislators all focused on redistricting. Several of the sessions were completely about how to avoid lawsuits. And so one of the things that they recommended to avoid lawsuits is have an open process. And so it's possible that they may listen to that recommendation to try to make it more open and more transparent. We don't know. We'll have to see what they decide.
And if a suit is filed, at some point, I guess you have to decide whether the districts will be redrawn or not. Do they just stay the same until the suit is settled?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
They do. That's why it was such a problem in 2012 and 13. It took a whole year for them to get through the suit and then redraw the lines and get them approved, finalized. Because for that whole year, there were districts that were really packed up because there had been growth. And so there was very unequal, unfair population numbers. And that's not fair to the voters.
Thank you.
I mentioned a way that you all can, as individuals, that you can really make a big difference. The League has a new platform, and this is called Outreach Circle. But this is a way that you can keep track of what the League is doing. We put announcements, like we put information about this forum on there. We put information, we'll be putting action alerts. We make it really easy for you to share this information with your friends and contacts. So if you have a friend in Glasgow, Kentucky, maybe you want to show them about these maps, let them know about this information, that they need to contact their legislator. You can easily do that through Outreach Circle. So all you have to do is download the Outreach Circle app from your phone, put in our code, which is DUV 861, or you can just point your phone at this QR code and it will automatically bring you to the place where you need to be. But this is a tool that we're going to be using in the coming year to be able to rapid fire get out information that you need to know, because as Cindy alluded to the fact that they may be making decisions pretty quickly and trying to get this done a little bit under the radar. So we want to be on top of that. We want to be able to contact you. The great thing about this app, we will pre-write emails or text messages for you. You just got to send them out to your friends and contacts, and you can edit it if you want to, but you don't have to compose anything yourself. So it makes it really easy to get the word out about these things. So if each of us were to contact, 10 or 20 of our friends, that would really go a long way to letting legislators know. Because Cindy said, if they get a call from 10 people, then that's telling them that they need to start paying attention. And I tell you, it's so easy. I was able to sit down and just like text 100 people in just like a few, half an hour, it was done. And I was like walking my dog. So it's something that you don't have to meet anybody in person to do. It's COVID safe. And it is really easy. And if you know how to use text messaging, if you know how to send an email, this is even easier than that, because you don't have to write the email yourself. You don't have to write the text message yourself. So anyway, check it out. It's going to be a great tool for us to use in this campaign as we're trying to make sure that that we are choosing our legislators and that they are not choosing their voters.
Cindy, did you want to say anything else, or does anybody else have some?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Jen just said about using Outreach Circle. It would be a fabulous, quick, easy way to get messages to legislators. And by sharing it with folks across the state, if you've got friends in Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky, and can share it with them, then they can begin to reach out to their own legislators. So yeah, I think that's going to be a real boon to our effort. We'll probably start pushing on messaging in December because we need to get out ahead if they think they're going to be able to do the actual bill and work in 2021. We're pretty sure they can't get the data until well into January or February, even if it gets pushed hard. The problem is the census data folks have to get that data carefully put into the precincts, and that's a bit of a challenge in order for them to have the data that they need to redraw the maps. So we're hoping that gets pushed back well into the session if they do it in 2021. That gives us some time to talk to them, and it gives them hopefully a little time to get some maps up so people could look at them and comment. We will have maps to share using the 2010 data to show people what that looks like before long. Susan's been working on it, and we're about ready to make those, put those out publicly. So watch for those, and just take a look at what we think can be different.
Sounds great. Thanks, Cindy. Janie Lindell just said that she used Outreach Circle, or she registered for it.
All right.
Just as she was watching the
All right, great.
screen. So it is easy.
That's
great.
perfect.
Any other questions for
Any other
Cindy or
questions
comments?
Delightful to see all your names out there.
Thanks so much, Cindy, for doing this for us. It was very informative, and hopefully this whole group will be getting their friends to do something about redistricting and contacting their legislators and using Outreach Circle. And we'll be letting you know all the actions that are going on. So thanks again to Ms. Heine. It was a wonderful program. Thanks to all of you for being here. We hope you'll join us again in January 2020. The date is yet to be announced, but it will be Mayor Gorton and several speakers talking about the results of the Mayor's Commission on Racial Justice and Equality. So it should be also a very good program. And you can register either on Outreach Circle or at lwvlexington.com. So,
But our registration isn't up for that yet. We're the mayor has a
Right. We
tight
have to have a
schedule,
date
so we
first.
have to wait within 1 month of the event to be able to actually hammer down a date for that. So, but if you join Outreach Circle, you'll get that notification, or if you can just check back. We do try to post information on our events page for other organizations that are having programs that are of interest. So if you learn about those things, let us know. We can post them on our events website and let other league members know. That's really helpful for us to, because you know, we're all involved in different groups and get information from different places. So so it's helpful when we get that information from our members.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thanks for your
thanks.
attention,
Hope to
everybody.
see you in January.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.